Is Farieh a sequel to Wheatfields?
The technical answer to that question is yes. When you put a character in novel number 1 and then you write novel number 2 about her, it becomes a sequel by almost anybody's definition. What I did try to do, though, with this second novel was write something that you could pick up without having read Wheatfields. I'm not saying that Wheatfields won't be helpful, but I think you can pick up Farieh, open it up, start reading it, and learn about Farieh and learn about her situation without having read the first book. So yes, it's a sequel, but not a necessary sequel.
An excellent answer. I like that from a publishing point of view as well. Very good. The political situation in Iran plays an important role in this book. Why did you want to include it? And I have to say, it's really my favorite part of the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you. I have followed the political situation in Iran for many, many years. I've been fascinated by it. I've been troubled by it, but I follow it. It's of interest to me. And because Farieh was from Iran, I thought a couple of things made sense. Number one, it made sense that she would go back there after the completion of her first year at KU because she had not seen her parents for a full year. And it would make sense that she would encounter what have come to be called the headscarf protests in Iran. That wouldn't necessarily mean that she would participate in them or even pay very much attention to them. But it seemed inevitable that someone of her age and someone of her intellectual depth would know about them, and so that was the first step. And then I thought, maybe Farieh wouldn't be caught up in this, but maybe one of her friends would. And so that gave me the idea for Mary, who is Farieh's closest friend from high school. And then, not really knowing how to create a close relationship between two Iranian girls growing up in Tehran, I called my expert witness, and Nora Garami quickly filled me in on what it is that Iranian girls who were 8 and 10 and 12 and 14 might be doing as they grew up in a big city. And that's what led to the stories about Mary and Farieh in the book. And then, so that was the answer. The other part of the answer is I thought this would be dramatic, for want of a better term, and I'm glad you like it.
It's definitely dramatic, but we won't give anything away. Well, will you share reading?
Yes. I certainly will. Let me say this before we get much farther with the program. We are roughly 15 to 20 minutes from being done, and so if anybody needs to leave, please do. We're going to do some readings and a couple more interactions with Thea. It's no revelation for me to say that our lives are shaped by our relationships. Having completed an eye-catching freshman year, Farieh embarks upon a second, starting with a trip to England and Scotland with her professor's British Summer Institute. She meets her sister in Oxford at the end of that month, then travels home to Iran, where she will stay with her parents and where she hopes to see her best friend Mary, who stayed in their home country for college while Farieh went to KU. Mary is an activist whose protests are well known to the Iranian government. In the chapter titled A Silent Scream, Mary is on the run and in hiding, and it is there she meets the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps in person. Mary had heard someone walk up the stairs to her floor. The distinct gait had awakened her, but it was not clear what had happened after that. As her head cleared in her pitch-black chamber, she was relieved her breathing was so close to normal. But she had to deal with the beating of her heart. She took deep breaths. That helped. And she listened. For what seemed minutes, she heard nothing. Then she heard the sound of the same person descending the stairs and turning a corner and descending a few more stairs until she could hear nothing more. A sliver of light revealed her exit. When she crawled to it, she pulled away the pieces of trash as though they were Jenga blocks. Once she had cleared the trash, she crouched through the opening, stood, slid along the interior until she reached the door, and slowly moved past it onto the 7th floor. She took her time with this final passage out of the column, grateful for the protection she had received there, and turned right toward the stairway. She had taken 3 steps when a latex-gloved hand closed over her mouth and another settled on her right shoulder. Don't scream. She understood the soft command of the voice next to her, but took a sharp breath in order to do just the opposite. It was then the right side of her body caught fire, from the shoulder where the hand had rested, down her side to her hips, all the way out to her fingertips. She had never experienced such pain, and she collapsed under its weight. The voice returned, barely surfacing through lapping waves of agony. I will make the pain stop, but you have to promise not to scream. Will you do that? Nod your head up and down if you do. It was all Mary could do to move her head, but she moved it a fraction, and that was enough. The pain went away. Before she could form another thought, the same latex fingers that had closed her mouth were forcing her to open it. They pushed an object that felt like a small lemon between her teeth, then closed her mouth over it. Next came strong adhesive tape, which held her mouth closed over the lemon. Whoever attacked her must have had 4 arms, because her own arms were pulled behind her and bound with something narrow and sharp, plastic probably, maybe a zip tie by the sound of it. At the same time, everything else was happening. Whoever was a man, and he was now kneeling in front of her. Let me help you up, he said. Mary desperately wanted to stand, and without his help, she would not have been able to do so. The man facing her was no taller than she was. He might have been 30 years old with dark hair and a thin beard, carefully trimmed, beneath thin lips and a hawk nose. He was dressed entirely in black. Lightweight, loose-fitting pants, a lightweight hoodie, probably nylon, and black leather shoes with no soles, an adult's version of the booties her sister bought for her toddler. He was not powerfully built. If anything, he was slender, but he was alert, his eyes steady in the moon's light. And if he was the person who had disabled her through pressure on her brachial plexus, he knew anatomy like a surgeon and had more grip strength than power lifters twice his size. Mary was terrified.
Well, Bill, we're going to leave that part of the book, and we're going to move to the University of Kansas, and we're going to talk about an academic issue that I swear you had a crystal ball when you were working on thinking about this book, because you hit some very hot topics. The next one I want to talk about is the use of AI in the academic context. We've seen it be used in papers, images and video creation, even unfortunately in the creation of entire books. In the fall of 2023, there was a class action lawsuit that was brought by a group of very famous authors saying that there was systematic fraud going on with the use of AI, the scraping to help make AI smarter. And in January of this year, the New York Times sued the owner of ChatGPT, OpenAI, claiming that millions of copyrighted works have been fraudulently used without permission. Can you share with us how you address this important issue, Farieh?
Well, Farieh is one of the most brilliant undergraduate students at the University of Kansas. And if anyone is speaking with either students or faculty at KU now, you know that many faculty at KU are actually encouraging students to try AI, to experiment with it. To what extent the encouragement goes, I'm not personally aware. I do know that this encouragement is going on. But Farieh is a special kind of student, and she's in the honors program. And so it struck me as, I'm going to use the term dramatic again, it struck me as dramatic to put her in a situation where she would try AI, even though in the honors program, at least in this novel, it's not permitted. The honors program in this novel does not allow its students to use AI. So Farieh does that. She runs out of time with an assignment that she's almost completed, and uses AI to finish the last paragraph, basically. As it turns out, one of her classmates used the same program, and Farieh's paper ends up in front of her mentor with exactly the same sentence in it as one of the other students. So, first time out, Farieh gets a warning. That's all. It's a very almost casual warning given to her by her mentor. Please don't do it again. No, it's very attractive, blah, blah, blah. Later on in the novel, when Farieh is really trying hard to contend with this boyfriend relationship that she has gotten into, she is once again out of time. But this time, she has not written all but a paragraph of the paper. And this time, she has to use it wholesale, so to speak. So she has returned to Lawrence. She meets Stephen, he's the guy. Their relationship, I believe, dominates the middle of the book. And when she returns from her time in Iran, she's vulnerable. And she does this. So she's once again caught out in it, and she's summoned to her advisor's office, and she goes to the meeting through a downpour. Anybody in this room knows what a downpour looks like in Kansas. In the chapter called Rain, we walk her from her scholarship hall through the storm to her advisor's office. In the middle of this chapter, and we don't have time to read the whole chapter, is the actual encounter with her advisor. We're going to take you to the meeting, and we're going to pick up after the meeting. So first, on the way. Farieh had seen rain like this before, in the spring of her freshman year. It had been April, and she had just pushed through the front door of her scholarship hall on her way to the Union when she saw a wall of gray just past the porch. It wasn't a dull gray. Thousands of clear beads moved on its surface, thousands more moved inside. Teardrop-shaped, the beads bore downward and splattered as they hit the ground, bursting sideways and upward off the hard surface of the sidewalk. All the way to the street from the covered porch, tiny translucent geysers sprung up from the pavement to rush past or intercept the beads falling down toward them. And when they crashed together, as they did, constantly, their mid-air explosions joined the barrage along the sidewalk. Her freshman year, she had turned around and gone back to her room, glad the trip to the Union could wait. But Farieh was a sophomore. She had the same honors advisor who had inspired her as a freshman, who had led her on last summer's intellectual frolic in England, and who was once again her favorite teacher, this time in a seminar about women writers. Her advisor had asked her to come to Westcote Hall for a conference. She was due there in 10 minutes. She would be late if she did not step off the porch. So she stepped off into a rain so furious she felt like she was walking into the ocean's surf during a storm. Farieh's jeans and sneakers were soaked before she could look down to notice them. Her umbrella failed next, twisting into a bright blue flag that announced her coming to anyone foolish enough to be out looking for her. No match for the wind when untied, the hood of her Sierra de Design's jacket nearly flipped back from her forehead. Dropping the umbrella, Farieh was able to secure the hood beneath her chin and protect her hair. 5 minutes later, after running most of the way to Wesco and clearing its few outside steps onto the safety of its porch, her shoulders were dry and her hair, but she looked like she had been weighed in her clothes. Farieh set the letter on the desk. We're now through the interview with the honors advisor. We're back at Miller Hall. And her advisor has given her 2 letters. One is official, one is personal. She's just finished the personal. Farieh set the letter on the desk. Her hair was still wet, and the strand of it that had strayed beneath the collar of the bathrobe loosed a drop of cold water down the middle of her back. Shivering in response, she wrapped the robe more closely around her and walked to her bed. Although it was still midday, she wanted to sleep, but she had to do something with her hair. She got up again, lifted a towel out of the clothes hamper in the closet, applied it vigorously to the top of her head, then pitched it back into the hamper. When she got back to her bed, she climbed under the covers. But still, she sat upright, looking out the window. Academic success had come fast. Already in the honors program when she arrived in Lawrence, she had surprised the Department of Mathematics by offering the test out of her entire undergraduate degree a few days after classes started, then dazzled the entire university by doing so in a stand-up chalkboard tour de force in Snowball. Her exceptional freshman grades reflected her exceptional papers and tests. She went to England and Scotland the next summer, returned to Lawrence, and capped her first semester as a sophomore with her selection as a university scholar. It had all come so easily. It was easy not to grieve the loss of a partner. Fatigue, embarrassment, resignation, hurt, all of these circled the afternoon, but not loss. Loss would come later, next fall. She would miss the honors program next fall. She would miss the challenge Professor Locklear had spoken of. Mostly, she would miss the camaraderie, working with her friends to understand and solve the problems Locklear and the other gifted teachers presented, laughing with them over tea at the Union, walking home with them as the light in the sky above Daisy Hill gave way to evening. Now, she was mostly cold. Her hair splayed as she fell back against the pillow. She tugged the covers up to her chin to answer yet another shiver that raced from her shoulders to her knees. The last thing she saw before her eyes closed was the daylight on the other side of the room. It was still raining.
One of the many things I admire about you and Drew is your commitment to social justice. Specifically, such fundamental concepts as providing support to all people with the goal of creating vibrant and diverse institutions and workplaces, to focus on giving a hand up to those who have faced unfair odds in creating equity, to seek to include those who have been historically underrepresented or discriminated against because of their identity or disability. Yes, DEI. You clearly saw the writing on the wall. What are your thoughts about the current climate? And could you share how you address this, quiet little under the rug topic in your book?
Well, the current climate is hard. It would really be foolish for me to say anything other. And yet, probably everybody in this room cares about other people. And at the bottom, diversity means anything. It means caring about the person who's sitting next to you, irrespective of what color they are, or their faith, or where they come from. Drew and I have spent some time on this, especially Drew. And in the summer of 2024, we were able to celebrate the actions that we took to prevent the Kansas legislature from unraveling the diversity initiatives at the University of Kansas. The legislature tried to do that. The governor vetoed that bill, and the veto stood. And then in the spring of this year, actually, maybe it was the spring of last year. Whenever it was, the legislature had another swing at it, and this time it was the Board of Regents who led the way to changing the culture at the University of Kansas as it relates to diversity. And in response, we're talking now about chronological response. In chronological response to that, the legislature, which once again acted about diversity activities in the University of Kansas. If you want to be supportive of what the legislature did, you could say they did little more than the regents had already done. And perhaps because of that, this time the legislation passed and became law. And you've all watched, if you read the Lawrence Journal World or talked to people in this community, the impact of that at KU. I wanted to write something that would engage Farieh, who is the main character of this book. It seemed to me that in the wake of what happened to her friend, she too would become an activist on campus. The issue is, what would she become an activist about? And I decided to write a novel about diversity. The last third of the novel has to do with that. Farieh takes on the Kansas legislature. She takes on the University of Kansas. She leads a protest in favor of diversity on the campus of the University of Kansas. And without giving the entire thing away, I wanted her to have something other than a terrible, dreadful, no good, very bad result. And so, because I'm a novelist and not a newspaper reporter, I could make that happen. And so, the novel is a little bit more optimistic than what I'm going to read to you next has to do with the very evening of the start of Farieh's activities vis-a-vis the university at the University of Kansas. She and her friends had done some planning. They realized that something has to start. And as she walks home that evening, Farieh thinks about that and thinks at least once about this relationship with a guy named Stephen, which she has finally let go. The chapter is a long walk home. Greenhall is expressionless from morning to dusk, its charcoal windows accepting little of the day's light and giving nothing back. At night, were there trees around it, a passerby might miss its ordinary outline altogether. But as there are no trees at night, it stands out, though without distinction, barely second place to the architecture of the School of Engineering that sits across the street to the north and is itself no threat for the Pritzker Prize. Farieh walked out of the law school through the lower doors, across Irving Hill Road, and continued east on the sidewalk in front of the Allen Fieldhouse parking facility. She would ordinarily take the other way back, to Slauson Hall, up the hill, then east down Jayhawk Boulevard. Tonight, she decided to take the back way. Through the neighborhood south of the Chancellor's residence, up the hill on the Chancellor's back drive, and around the corner to Miller. She walked the length of Capitol Federal Hall and past the north end of the Ambler Rec Center. The lighting from the vast parking lot that joined the two made for a confident transition to University Place. A residential enclave immediately south of the campus, University Place presented short blocks and mature trees and charming homes in a variety of traditional styles. Though there was much less light here, there was enough. Farieh could see the houses clearly, and and the occasional bicycle or scooter leaned up next to a sidewalk. The miasma of the asphalt repair work in the Ambler Center parking lot was gone now, replaced by something familiar to Northeast Kansas on an April day. The night air in University Place smelled like sheets, pinned to a clothesline in late afternoon, and left until morning, clean and crisp with a hint of moisture. Why do women look like property to men, especially rich men? Something they can pull down from a shelf to amuse themselves, and then either put back for next time or pitch away. And if we let them know they hurt our feelings, we're clinging. If we get angry, and God forbid, express ourselves in that way, then we're bitchy. If they acknowledge our feelings, it is only to recoil from them. They want a pretty face, someone who looks great in a little black dress, but a real relationship? Farieh had turned north, moving past the picture book residence toward the university. Her anger at Stephen was cooling, but not just cooling. New thoughts were pushing it out altogether. She had had other things to do this semester, important work. Not classwork, though she certainly had that. The work she was thinking of was personal. Farieh had sensed from New Year's Day that she and Stephen would fail. The realization lay so deep in January that some would have called it unconscious. But it grew, winnowing through her thoughts, insistent. Her mind and her heart made less and less space for Stephen and his indifference. In their place, she found Mary. Mary had been there the entire time. Farieh's personal work in the spring was for Mary. Farieh had been asked to organize a student response to the Kansas legislature, which was once again mucking around with diversity on college campuses. The conservative-dominated House and Senate seemed even-handed about it. Any limiting legislation would apply to all the region's schools. But the undergraduates in Lawrence knew KU was the real target. If the bill passed the House and Senate, getting the governor to veto the bill was their last chance. KU's opposition to the bill at that point would be important, maybe decisive. She would do everything she could to make it happen. Farieh and her group would approach the university. They would ask KU to support a veto. If the school sat on the fence, which she expected, she would take things up a notch. She would lead a sit-in at the chancellor's office. No one at Farieh's group believed the sit-in would work, but Farieh believed it was a necessary next step on the way to an all-out protest. Farieh was already working on the details of the protest. They would do the sit-in first. Protests were disruptive. They could get out of hand. But in her heart, Farieh knew how the university would respond to the milder parts of the plan. KU would do nothing. There would have to be a protest. She had climbed the south slope of Mount Orion and had just passed the Outlook, where the lower public floor of the university's official residence showed dark to the outside. On the north side of the second floor, where the chancellor lived, a single light shone in the window facing Miller Hall. Probably his office, she thought. Probably he's working. Farieh had met the chancellor earlier freshman year. As a first semester sophomore, she had attended his lively party for the honors program in December. 2 months later, she had spent nearly an hour with him at the university scholars event. He was handsome and thoughtful, and she liked him. She hoped he would not be angry with her once the protests started. But that would be up to him.